Clearly not a musician because I have to get used to the microphone. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming tonight. My name is Chris Benner. I'm the faculty director of the Institute for Social Transformation, one of the sponsors for tonight's event. And before we get underway, the theme of tonight's event is women's activism, indigenous rights, and the environment. And so I think it's particularly appropriate for us to reflect a little bit on the history of this land. And most of you know, I think, that this land is the unceded territory of the Awaswas-speaking Yupi tribe. And the Amamutsan tribal band, which is comprised of the descendants of indigenous people taken to Mission Santa Cruz and San Juan Bautista during Spanish colonization of the Central Coast, is today working hard to restore traditional stewardship practices on these lands and heal from historical trauma. And as I give that land acknowledgement, I want to emphasize that it's really important that we not treat land acknowledgements as simply a performative act. That it's a reminder to us to understand that history, to understand the continued engagement and leadership of indigenous peoples in this land, learn what they are doing, what they're striving for. If there's ways you can find to help be in solidarity with that work, please find that. But it's also really important to recognize the leadership that indigenous peoples have here locally and globally that we'll hear some about tonight in some of the most cutting edge social change work that we need to see in this world. So for us locally, Amamutsan Tribal Band, amamutsan.org, check out the Amamutsan Land Trust, really important issue. Look at the Protect Uristock campaign, trying to protect some of their sacred land. And for those of you who are book readers, I would really encourage you to look at a book called We Are Not Animals. Subtitle is Indigenous Politics of Survival, Rebellion, and Reconstitution in 19th century California. It's written by Martin Rizzo Martinez, who got his PhD in history here at UC Santa Cruz, is now an assistant professor in the Film and Digital Media program. And it's just a powerful story that understands both how awful the mission of Santa Cruz was in particular and the genocide that existed during that period. And it's an incredible story of survival and rebellion and reconstitution of indigenous peoples that never disappeared from this land and are struggling today to steward land in really important ways. So with that, I want to thank our sponsors in particular for tonight, especially the Rachel Carson College, who was a major financial supporter and helped with some of our relationships with the Self-Employed Women's Association, people who are here today. Please give a shout out to Shelley Graby and Rachel Carson College. And other co-sponsors include the Institute for Social Transformation that I run. And any staff people with the Institute, could you please raise your hand? There's Ned LeBlond, Evan Knight in the back. And Galena Hale, who's our incoming faculty director. I'm stepping down in 2 months, and Galena's taking over. Vicente Vega's in the back there. So, and there are others that really contributed. But the other co-sponsors include the Student Fee Advisory Committee, the Graduate Student Commons and Grad Lab, the Center for South Asian Studies, Center for Labor and Community, the Center for Reimagining Leadership, Feminist Studies, and Critical Race and Ethnic Studies. And it's, just such a pleasure and honor that we have such a supportive community here at UC Santa Cruz who really care about events like this, which is the 11th annual Right Livelihood Laureate Lecture. Which is now part of what's become a week-long conference. It used to be just a lecture, and it's evolved into a conference, and in fact a chance for laureates who are here to engage with and meet a whole variety of community partners and people in our region working on similar issues. And one of the important parts of the Right Livelihood presence on our campus which is directed by Dave Shaw. Do you want to raise your hand, Dave? Dave Shaw is the coordinator of the Right Livelihood Center. Yeah, give Dave a big round of applause. But we also have a Right Livelihood student club that's been really critical in supporting the work on campus and building ties with students that are at all the other campuses of the Right Livelihood College Network, which is a network of universities around the globe that are affiliated with the Right Livelihood Foundation, supporting laureates and helping educate the broader public about that work and helping lift up the leaders of the next generation. So we have two students who've been involved in that work at UC Santa Cruz, Aishwarya Gangadhar and Allegra Morielli. So I want to turn it to them to say a little bit about the work that they've done and the impact Right Livelihood has had on them and their work. So yeah, Aishwarya, to you first.
Yes, thank you. So good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to this lecture. My name is Aishwarya, and I'm a PhD student in social psychology and also a graduate student member of the Right Livelihood Center. Around the same time last year, I was amongst the audience of the same public talk at this conference. I attended the conference last year because the center piqued my interest, and I was curious. I decided to go, and I ended up attending most of the 5-day events that was a week long. And especially meeting the laureates of the Right Livelihood one-on-one, I was blown away. The laureates were inspiring and driven by passion and had dedicated their lives for social and environmental injustices in their communities. Although these laureates came from different countries like Chile, Kenya, and Cambodia, I noticed that there was something common between them, which was their powerful presence and inner fire that fought for creating social change and bringing justice. Their talks and stories deeply resonated with me, and I realized they were such amazing, wonderful human beings working for greater causes for humanity. And I had the honor of meeting them and interacting with them also. I felt hopeful. So as a PhD student, I wanted to do something that I could be of service as well. Since my research training also aligns with the values of social justice and collaborating with community change makers. So after the conference, I met with Dave from the Right Livelihood Center to express my excitement and reflections about the conference. And in a turn of events, I was able to strategize and plan an actual research collaboration on understanding women's climate resilience and engagement against climate change with one of the laureates, SEWA, from my home country, India, who is also present here. The theme of this conference and my future collaboration with SEWA was made possible with the wonderful support of my advisor, Dr. Shelley Graby, who's also co-sponsor of this event, and provost of Rachel Carson College. I also want to thank Dave and the Right Livelihood Center for making this happen. The center aims to act as a bridge between undergraduate, graduate students, and the faculty with the laureates. So I encourage you all to check out their website, as there are many possibilities for you to get involved, engage, and be inspired to contribute in your capacities. It's a great platform to get educated about issues internationally, mobilize, join movements, and act for humanity, hope, and be the change we want to see. I truly hope this lecture makes you reflect on the issues that were discussed and leaves you inspired to act in your own ways and paths, just like it did for me. And thank you, and have a wonderful evening.
Hello, everyone. My name is Allegra Morelli. I'm a first-year student at here UC Santa Cruz, and we are so excited to have all of you here. As an active community member in Southern California, I have been very passionate about spreading awareness about helping our oceans and beaches stay clean. Gender equality and women's rights are also very important to me, and as a first year here, meeting John in October and Dave, I have been involved in the entire time in the core team and the International Student Network, We'd be happy to have any of you join us. Feel free to speak to me afterward. It has been just an incredible experience hearing just what fuels everyone's heart, whether it's Earth trusteeship, environmental justice, social justice. It's really been truly a gift, and we look forward to seeing you all again. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Logan Wells. I'm a third-year politics and legal studies transfer student here, and I'm a member of the Right Livelihood Corps. I've been a part of student activism since coming to high school, and then coming to college, where I really started to expand and connect with different cultural organizations and bring a multicultural perspective as a mixed student myself to college campuses. Right Livelihood has been a fantastic opportunity for me to really expand my knowledge of other activism around the world, and I've brought that to our student government here on campus, SUA, where I'm attempting to be the SUA president at the current moment, running on a reform, equality, action, and leadership platform. And what I'm hoping to bring is what I'm always trying to fight for, which is collaboration with the students and bringing openness and transparency to government actions, and always trying to involve students rather than block and exclude people. And I'm so happy for being a part of Right Livelihood and being able to experience so much about the values of cooperativism and just building opportunity around the world, and the fact that we all can really make significant, true impact when we work together as a family unit and as just a human experience of just trying to help each other and recognizing that no matter what our situations are, we still come from the same core, the same blood, and truthfully, we all want the same things, which is just to live life and live happily. And if you'd like, we're going to have a mixer upstairs after this event where we'll be able to kind of talk in a more fun, open setting. And next week, May 7th, we're going to have a reflection on this very event and just kind of talking about our experiences and how much we've grown from this wonderful opportunity. And thank you so much for letting me be here.
And I'll just mention there's tons of free food at the mixture upstairs afterwards, so check it out. So a couple of logistical things before we get underway. The restrooms are out those doors there and to the left. Feel free to use them. Don't go into the dining hall. That's food in there, but the bathrooms are totally open. There are books for sale at the table over there about the Self-Employed Women's Association. So a few of them for sale. Check them out afterwards. And then finally, you all have a 3x5 card on your seat. That's how we're going to handle question and answers. So if you have any questions as the discussion goes ahead, please write them. Dave and I will, partway through, gather them and pass them up. Okay, you are in for a treat tonight. It's going to be amazing conversation. Now for the main event, we have three just inspiring laureates here. Joan Carling, a Filipino indigenous activist, which is a 2024 laureate. Reema Nanavaty, General Secretary of the Self-Employed Women's Association of India, which was a 1984 laureate recipient. And Ryoka Shimizu from the Sekatsu Club Consumers Cooperative in Japan, which was a 1989 laureate. The full introductions to them and the work that they've done will be given by our moderator tonight, who's my beloved colleague in the sociology department, Madhvi Murthy. She has expertise in feminist theory, political economy, globalization, media studies, popular culture. And with that, Madhvi, I'll turn it over to you and invite everyone to come up to the stage.
Do you want some waters? Okay. Good evening, everyone. It's such a privilege to welcome and be in conversation with three formidable women and activists: Joan Carling, a 2024 Right Livelihood Laureate, Reema Nanavaty, and Ryoko Shimizu, who are a part of long-standing movements for justice for the historically marginalized, indigenous peoples, the urban poor, and laborers in informal and unorganized sectors of the economy. They're a part of movements in Asia, led and sustained by women, that have and continue to mobilize for human rights, climate justice, labor rights, and sustainable models of producing that which we need and consume. They're a part of movements sustained by women who have waged enduring fights against the exploitation of land, against brutally extractive processes that have devastated the land and the peoples who are its caretakers, against forced displacement, and against the absence of social security nets for the most marginalized. They, Joan, Reema, and Ryoko, have the weighty and difficult task, therefore, of not only representing themselves, but are also called upon to represent the multitudes of women who sustain these fights. So I want to talk a little bit about each of them and then ask some questions and get this conversation started. So starting with Joan Carling, representing the Indigenous Peoples Rights International, is an indigenous rights activist from the Philippines who has worked to defend the rights of indigenous peoples for more than 30 years. Her work spans the local and the global, focusing on human rights, sustainable development, climate justice, and the fight against land exploitation. Her advocacy has had a profound impact, from helping stop destructive mining projects opposed by indigenous communities to influencing policies on indigenous women's rights at the United Nations. In the Philippines, 75% of key mining areas overlap with indigenous territories, which contain some of the world's richest gold reserves. Despite these resources, however, indigenous communities themselves remain some of the poorest in the nation and face constant threats of violence, displacement, and criminalization for defending their lands. The state in the Philippines, under successive administrations, has frequently labeled entire indigenous communities as insurgents or terrorists to justify extrajudicial killings and forced displacement, thus cementing their systemic marginalization. Carling herself, among 600 others, was labeled a terrorist by the Duterte regime, a charge that was dropped only after a sustained legal battle. Carling envisions a world where indigenous peoples are recognized as vital stewards of the environment and defenders of human rights. She continues to advocate for the protection of indigenous lands and at the end of criminalization and violence against indigenous peoples, and the promotion of gender equality within indigenous communities and the society at large. Reema Nanavaty, representing the Self-Employed Women's Association of India, is a social worker who focuses on women's economic empowerment by building women-owned enterprises and women-led supply chains in energy, agribusiness, food processing, waste recycling, and textiles. As SEWA's General Secretary, she's led efforts to rebuild the lives and livelihoods of earthquake-affected rural women and rehabilitation programs in Afghanistan and Sri Lanka. She helped initiate SEWA's food security program that covers 1 million households and leads the Hariali, or Green Energy and Livelihoods Initiative, to provide women access to renewable energy. SEWA, which received the Right Livelihood Award alongside its founder Ila Bhatt in 1984, is India's largest trade union for women. It is, in fact, a cooperative union of over 3 million people, 3 million women, mobilized for economic independence and collective organizing. All 3 million SEWA members belong to the informal sector, the 93% of Indian laborers who lack social protection and are therefore most susceptible to economic and climate shocks. Founded in 1972, SEWA members have acquired new negotiating power with their employers through organization and mobilization. They've established health, death, and maternity benefit schemes in the absence of meaningful social security benefits. They've set up dozens of cooperatives of various trade groups to share skills and expertise, develop new tools, designs, and techniques, engage in bulk buying and joint marketing. SEWA's women include weavers, tailors, cigarette rollers, vendors of fruit, fish, and vegetables, firewood, as well as waste paper pickers and road construction workers. Most are subject to high rent for stalls or the tools of their trade, and also to routine exploitation or harassment by moneylenders, employers, and officials. Ryoko Shimizu represents the Saikatsu Club Consumers Cooperative in Japan, where she's been a member for nearly 4 decades. The Saikatsu Club, founded in 1965 with 200 women who bought 300 bottles of milk to get a more affordable price, is now a 500,000 member cooperative union and one of the most successful sustainable models of production and consumption in the industrialized world. A 1989 Right Livelihood Laureate, the Saikatsu Club aims to obtain what they call safe food at reasonable prices. As an organized collective, it therefore decides on the specifications, the kind of materials, the production processes, packing materials, environmental consciousness, etc., of food and other consumer goods in cooperation with producers and purchases them by pre-ordering. When the club cannot source products of the required quality to meet their ecological or social standards, it has considered producing them itself, as it now does with milk. The club works to humanize the market by enabling direct contact between producers and consumers, especially in the area of food production, where consumers regularly visit farmers to observe production methods and or to lend a hand. As it works to advocate for the sustainability of local agriculture, it has run counter to large global trade agreements, such as the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. The Saikatsu Club declared itself GMO-free in 1997 and promotes a nuclear-free society by pushing for the construction of wind and solar power facilities. Moreover, since the 1980s, the club has established over 600 workers' collectives, running restaurants, bakeries, used goods stores, soap factories, and caring for the elderly. Clubs in different regions in Japan also operate their own long-term nursing care and childcare programs. We would be hard-pressed, I think, to find a better group of women to share with us their experiences and insights from their decades-long work with organizing for social, economic, and climate justice. So I want to start with asking a few questions, and then we'll open it up for conversation with all of you. As Chris mentioned, you have the 3x5 cards. You please note down your questions as we continue to converse here. My questions are going to be broad, they're open-ended, and each question is made up of several other questions. But the idea here is so you can pick elements you would like to talk about. So I want to start with the first phrase in the title or the name of the Right Livelihood Conference this year, Women's Activism. I'd love to have each of you discuss, based on your experiences with organizations in the Philippines, in India, and Japan, what you think is distinctive and significant about women's organizing and mobilizing. Women organizing not only as women, but as women and workers, as women and consumers, as women and producers and stewards of the land. How has women's activism in the Indigenous Peoples Rights International, in SEWA, and in the Saikatsu Club Consumers Cooperative changed over the decades since they were founded, even as political alignments globally and locally have shifted, and as their own socioeconomic conditions have changed? How have the processes through which women conceive of their political concerns, their organizing and mobilizing changed over time? And could you elaborate on why women's activism is crucial for the fight for climate justice? Joanne, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, okay. From my experience as an indigenous activist, it's very clear that indigenous women are at the front line of defending our lands and resources. And they are the peacemakers and peace builders in order to ensure that there is security in our territories. So I want to give an example when at the height of the of the struggle of tribal communities in my region against large dams. When the companies started to bring the equipment to already put the dam, the structure on the river, the women came together and discussed what can they do to stop the men from doing that. That is not seen as aggressive or violent. So what they did was they went to the construction site where there are also soldiers guarding the men doing the construction. And they went there with their shirts and they removed their shirts. And then they said, you men, you need to know where you come from. You come from our breast. And you need to respect that your life come from us. But with what you're doing, you're going to kill us. So the men felt embarrassed. They don't know where to look, right? Because it's all the women showing their breasts. And so they retreated. They retreated. They were feeling embarrassed, right? And so the women dismantled what they were putting in place. So they were successful in stopping that. In another occasion, where there was a history of underground mining that shifted to open pit mining. And I don't know if you've seen open pit, where they practically flatten a mountain, right? With all the machines coming in and out 24 hours a day. So when they've seen that kind of destruction, they said, we will stop that. And you know what they did? Early in the morning, women and children lie down. They lay down where the bulldozers are coming in their numbers, right? More than 100 women and children lying down. So the bulldozers cannot come in because they will have to crush the people, right? So that stopped the mining company and forced them to negotiate with the communities. So that's what I mean when I say Indigenous women are in the front line of defending our lands and resources. And the reason for that is for Indigenous women, we're with nature, right? And the closest to nature are Indigenous women because men, by history, can leave the community. They go to war, for example, or they go and find jobs. But women stay. They stay in the village. They work in the farms. They work in the forest. So anything that happens around them threatens women and their role. So when these are threatened, they have nothing to lose. And they're willing to step up collectively to protect and defend their lands, territories, and resources. So I think that's the distinctness of women. And when we talk of women's activism, it's not just the being frontline, but also using the collective principles and values of women and in fighting this kind of battles. So there's a strong sense of collective action, that the interdependence is there. So we always, Indigenous women always act together. They don't see themselves as just individuals. We see ourselves as a collective, and by acting together, can we make a difference? So it's always that relationship of interdependence, mutual cooperation, and solidarity, and caring for each other that also drives Indigenous women's activism, that also drives Indigenous women's movements.
Yes, yeah. I'm very honored to be here, and I feel very nervous because I'm here on behalf of our members. The number of our members is now 420,000. So behind me, there are wonderful 420,000 members. So that's why I'm very nervous. And we started as a buying club of milk. we started in 1965 by 200 housewives, and those housewives started their collective buying because they want to change their society from the grassroots level. Because at that time, as I said, we started in 1965. At that time, most women stayed at home, taking care of the family, taking care of their kids, and men went to work to the cities. And our members, those 200 members were highly educated, but they didn't have a place to have their own say. So they started their own group to have their voices heard. And they started as a buying club of food, and they wanted to change their lifestyle at the grassroots level in their community. And they, all the time, they created what they really need in the society, in their local community. That is why, as she said, they started the daycare centers or nursing home for elderlies. And now majority of women work outside home, but still, our members. I forgot to say that our organization is a consumers cooperative, and consumers cooperative means that consumers own our cooperative. And I am an employee of the Circus Club Consumers Cooperative, so I am employed by our great members. and there was Japanese, sorry. And in a sense, Circus Club was a kind of school for learning democracy. So members get together and decide everything on their own. And each member have one vote. One member have one vote. So I think it was a very great way to empower women. So yeah, it is still the same. Yeah, even though many people work outside home, they are very active in the local areas, and they know the needs of the local community. So that is why they are still very active and creating many good, new things until now. Thank you.
Namaste. As Sister Roko said, I speak here on behalf of our 3.2 million members, all women workers in the informal economy in our country. And as it was mentioned in the introduction that by Madhviben, that 93% of the workforce in our country is in the informal sector. And so it's the 7% formal sector that has yet to learn how to partner and work with the informal sector. And I think in a country like ours, therefore, where there's surplus of labor and less of employment opportunities, how do you create alternative opportunities so that the poor can live a life of dignity and self-respect? And that is why organizing becomes a key. Organizing is the surest way. That is what our 5 decades of experience shows. It's the surest way to fight poverty. And we come together as poor, as women, and as workers, no matter what caste, community, or religion we belong to. We come together, we organize to build our collective strength in our fight against poverty. We're not here to fight a government or a contractor or a trader, but how do you fight poverty? By building your collective strength, by increasing your bargaining power, and earn a life of dignity and self-respect. There are certain values that I think, along with organizing, which play a very major role, and that is We were founded from the Textile Labor Association, which was founded by Mahatma Gandhi. And so we follow the Gandhian values of simplicity, truth, and nonviolence in our organizing process. And I want to give you some examples of how a joint action of struggle and development. So as a union, you organize the women workers, but how do you also create alternatives? And I will talk about both the urban informal sector workers and the rural workers in our country, because we are still an agrarian economy. 60% of the population lives in the rural areas. So how do you build the collective strength of the rural workers as well? And in the urban areas, the wives of the textile mill workers from where SEWA was founded were all in the informal sector, either selling old clothes on the streets or, vegetables, or working as head loaders in the textile market. And they were either seen as obstructing the traffic or, as encroachers by the municipal authorities and by the police. And these women needed small credit to continue doing their business. And there were no banks which were willing to give this small credit of, $1. Or $2 that they needed, which is 50 rupees or 100 rupees a day. And in our very second year of organizing, these women said that, why can't we have a bank of our own? And how can poor women who do not even have work security and income security have a bank? And one of our old clothes seller, she got up and she said, yeah, we are all poor, but we are so many. And if we all would contribute, and that is how we can have a bank of our own. And so the first principle that we always now follow at SEWA is that poor do not want charity. What they need is an enabling environment that equips and enables them to fight poverty. And so each member of SEWA contributed 10 rupees as a share, and they bought a share of 10 rupees. It was a huge struggle. It took us almost 2 years to register a bank of the poor. But that was the world's first ever microfinance institution. Which is a full-fledged registered cooperative bank, which today has 300,000 shareholders. And we have a paid-up share capital of 300 crores. I'm sorry, I don't know how do we convert it into millions of rupees, but it's a lot for a poor woman. But the second principle we learned, therefore, is organizing is a slow process. It has to be at the pace of the poor women. And that is what I think a lot of policymakers and development organizations and donors do not understand. They want to fit them into a project cycle where you want short-term gains and results. But if you want the ownership, if you want the organization to be rooted amongst the communities, it has to be at the pace of the women themselves. And the third and the important principle is that you identify the needs of the women in the communities, you identify what the issues are, and if you organize around those issues, it inculcates a sense of ownership and belongingness. She feels that, her issues were heard. She's able to speak here up, and that brings in a sense of ownership and belongingness. And that brings a long-term life. That's what helped us celebrate our 50 years in 2022, so 53rd year. And every year our membership grows by almost 10 to 20%. And so today we have about 3.2 million members, out of which 40% of our members are younger women, second or third generation members in the age group of 18 to 40 years of age, 30 years of age as well. And I would just end by giving one last example, and that is that organizing brings together women. Otherwise, these poor informal sector workers, they are all scattered, working from their homes. Their tools are old and worn out. They do not know where the raw material comes from, where the finished goods go. Very often they are small farm holders. They do not have access to the market directly. They have to rely on. But when they come together, in a trade committee meeting, we are a trade union, so we have trade committee meetings. It gives them that confidence that if she's able to change her life and destiny, so can I. And that's how women then come up to adopt new tools and technologies. So we have poorest of the poor women who now use solar pumps, an investment which is beyond their capacity. But, they feel that, oh, this technology can really help address their issue. And so they took a big loan from the bank. The banks also were willing to give the loan because, it was not one or two women, but thousands of women. And this was their own organization. And then they acquire green skills, because if you have thousands of pumps in a desert, you do need mechanics, because machines can create wonders, but they break down too. And that's how you have your own climate school. And I want to end by saying that we all talk about climate justice and social justice. But we are, in India, we had the worst of the heat wave last year. Temperatures went up to 54 degrees centigrade. And it was just impossible for the women and the families to go out and work. And you could go without work for 1 day and 2 days, but for these women to go without work for a week or 2 weeks altogether. And I was just talking to a small farmer, and she said that, the whole family is out of work, there's no food, children had to be pulled out of school because they could not pay the fees. The electricity bill could not be paid, so there was no electricity in this hot summer. And she was compelled to go to the moneylender, and the terms were not just exorbitant rate of interest, but he would ask for sexual favor because she was vulnerable. And the point I want to make is these women, in spite of this hardship, when we brought a parametric heat insurance product, not a single woman asked for subsidy. They paid up the premium. And when she got the payout for her insurance, the first thing she said was that you saved my dignity. So climate crisis leads to loss of dignity. It creates vulnerability for women. And that is the fact which is missed out in all the debates and discussions on climate. We talk about emissions and we talk about this and that. But for the poor and the women, it's a loss of dignity, and it increases so much of vulnerability. Think of a woman who has to go and sleep with somebody in front of her own children and her husband just because she needs to feed her family. And that's the climate justice we need to fight for. And I'm sure we will be able to. This year we have 500,000 women who paid up for the insurance premium for the parametric climate insurance. And that's why we say that we are poor, but we are so many. And that's where women are futuristic, and they are the ones we are very hopeful will bring about the change. Thank you.
Yeah, the last summer in India was one of the hottest. This summer promises to break that record as well. Right? is what I've read. I'm going to go off script a little bit. I've shared these questions with my interlocutors here, but I want to go off script just a little bit, to see if we can elaborate on some of these very key concepts, I think that all of you have brought up, these ideas of collectivities, right? Organizing, these conceptions of time, that organizing actually takes time, right? The embodied experiences of both inequity but then also resistance, right? That women putting their bodies on the line, because that is also precisely the experience of oppression, as all of you have noted, through these different stories. And Reema, you ended actually your comments just now by talking about how important these conceptions are for the ways in which we conceive of climate justice. So, I wondered if Joan and Ryoko, you want to elaborate too on how your organizations, how the women, in the cooperatives and in the organizations you're a part of, are thinking about climate justice and what form that has taken.
Yeah. Okay. From the indigenous perspective, let me give an overview of where we are. First is that indigenous peoples, we are 446 million all over the world, which is 6% of the global population. 20% of the land mass is our customary land that we have been protecting throughout centuries, which is also a subject of control by governments and corporations, and that is also including in the issue of climate change. So, and in spite of the colonization and assimilation, we are still persisting to protect and conserve 60 to 80% of the remaining biodiversity. But at the same time, while we are 6% of the global population, 30% of those killed for protecting the environment and human rights are from indigenous peoples, 30%. So we're facing a lot of risk and facing even, killings for what we do in protecting nature. So when we talk of climate justice now, there are two things that figures out strongly in relation to indigenous peoples. One is that we have the least carbon footprint, but we are suffering the most, living in the most fragile ecosystems that are impacted by climate change. You see droughts, flooding, sea rise. These are happening in indigenous territories. And even in that context that we have the least carbon footprint, yet we are contributing the most. We are the ones protecting the forest, for example, but we are regarded as destroyers of the forest. And in order to protect the forest, in the name of climate change, to prevent carbon emission, we are kicked out of the forest. Is that climate justice? Right? The ones protecting the forest for everybody else, the ones protecting the ecosystem, is being punished in the name of conservation. So that's one side. The other side is that we also see ourselves as victim of the solutions, like the just transition. The just transition has two components, right? The creation of renewable energy, like solar farms, windmills, geothermal, even hydro dams on one side. And in order to continue to build e-cars and solar plates, they need to do mining of critical minerals. And where is that critical minerals coming from? More than 50% is in indigenous territories or around indigenous territories. So, with the history of mining in indigenous territories, where we are not part of the decision making, we don't give consent, we receive all the toxic waste, the destruction of the environment, the destruction of our livelihoods, the destruction of our culture, the destruction of our sustainable ways of life. That's going to happen all over, again in the name of climate solution, in the name of climate change. We've seen the imposition of renewable energy like windmills in indigenous territories that were opposed by indigenous peoples, and yet governments insist. And that is causing the destruction of our livelihoods. So this is the scenario that we are facing now. So when we talk of climate justice, we need to make sure that our rights to our lands, territories, and resources is fully and legally recognized and protected, that the principle of sustainability and social equity needs to be in place, not just in rhetoric, not just in words, but in clear action and commitment. And when I say social equity, is because we've been hosting a lot of energy projects in our territories, yet we're not getting the energy. It's going to industries, it's going to the urban areas, it's going to tourism, but our communities are left in darkness, right? Where is equity there? And now the shift, don't get me wrong, right? We fully support the shift from fossil fuel to renewable energy, but it has to be done the right way. What's happening now is a shift under business as usual. It's the same corporations that are getting into building renewable energy, that are getting into mining of critical minerals. And their main objective is to gain as much profit as they can, not underpinned by their social responsibility to ensure that rights are respected and environments are protected. It's not like that. It's not changing. It's just a shift of business model. So we cannot sustain, or we cannot have just transition if that is the way, and where impacted communities on the ground do not have a say. So the participation in decision making is critical if we really want to shift, to achieve just transition. But more so, we cannot do that without looking into the wider picture of how production and consumption is actually taking place in the first place, right? What is driving a production? Is it the need of the people, or is it profit? We are generating so much energy, and there's a waste of energy, and instead of checking that, we want to produce more. Companies want to produce more instead of making sure that there is energy efficiency, because it's more profit for them, right? So that is for us, that is where climate justice, the lens, that we need to look at. But going to the issue of women, I also wish to re-echo that in this situation, women are more vulnerable to violence and to abuse. And this is data, clear data has shown that there is an increase of violence, including rape and even killings of indigenous women when we are evicted from our land, because we don't already have the social safety net. And when we are evicted from our land, we need to fend for ourselves, and we need to find food for the children. We need to find medicines. And so they go to places that they're not familiar with and unprotected. And since women are regarded as low, inferior, that they cannot complain, that we cannot complain, we don't have connections to politicians, to government officials, then the abuse increase, the violence happen in wide scale level in those kind of situation. And it also takes out the like I said, was mentioned earlier, it removes the dignity of women because they're not anymore in their territory where they feel comfortable to do what they know best. I mean, if they find themselves in urban areas, they're completely lost in urban areas because that's not their environment, right? And this discrimination is worse when we're mixed with non-Indigenous communities. It's even worse. And that's also where the dignity, the helplessness of Indigenous women comes in. So that's also why Indigenous women are in the front line of climate change. And it's important to hear the voice, and it's important that they participate in decision making. And it's important also to recognize and acknowledge the knowledge of women, because women knows their daily interaction with nature. They have the knowledge on how best communities can build their resilience against the impacts of climate change. What kind of food are there, what kind of medicine can be used, and what systems of cooperation. And that is one of the essential elements of Indigenous peoples and coping with climate change, is because of our unity, of our coherence, our cohesion as people, that when things happen like that, if a disaster, we immediately come together. Our sense of cooperation, our sense of solidarity is strong. Whatever we have, we share. I remember in where I come from, when in one remote area, there was a massive landslide where houses fell, and they were completely isolated. No vehicle can reach the area. And what the communities did, the neighboring communities of Indigenous peoples, they formed a human chain, kilometers of human chain, passing on food, medicine, all the way to where the isolated community is. So that also shows the kind of cooperation and solidarity that we have in order to deal with this kind of climate impacts. So thank you.
Yeah, I think I'm overwhelmed by you. But yeah, in Japan also, women are the first people who hit very hard by the climate change. And now in Tokyo, children are not allowed to play outside during summer because it is too hot. So women are very much aware of the climate change. And yeah, we have shortages of food due to the heat wave. And women are more know the impact of the global warming, I think, better than men. And also, as a consumer in Japan, we are in the industrialized world, so we easily contribute to global warming, global crisis, climate crisis. So it is very important to know that what is happening around the world, and women are suffering a lot, and so it is very important to be conscious about the situation. And also, we are working very hard not to contribute to the climate global warming. So we are trying to reduce the CO2 emission by reusing bottles for our container. Usually in Japan, everything is sold in a plastic container or plastic bags. So we are working very hard to reduce plastic waste. And also, yeah, we work with farmers and we work to protect their farmland. So, because we are very close to our producers and farmers, we know well about the environment, climate change, because farmers are also suffering from the climate change, and they can't grow food as they did in the previous years. So, that is how we are working to reduce the burden on the environment, so that we will not be hit hard by climate crisis.
Thank you so much. So, Joan, you were talking about, a minute ago, you were talking about indigenous knowledge about the climate crisis. And as I was preparing for this event, I read an interview of yours last year, that you gave last year, where you noted that contemporary academic, scientific work and political work that is focused on development and climate justice has increasingly begun to acknowledge indigenous knowledge, right? About the land, about its conservation. But you importantly pointed out that the recognition of indigenous peoples' rights to land, right, and its resources is often absent from within that conversation. And you noted in this interview that this reiterates the extractive relationship, of course, right, with indigeneity and indigenous people. So we'll take your knowledge, but we won't talk about your rights to the land. I was wondering in this context, reading this interview made me think. I was wondering if each of you could actually elaborate based on the distinctive experiences of your own organizations. If you could share moments when elements of the work of your organization, of your activism, have been taken up or appropriated, right? Even as the very fundamental issues about land rights, labor rights, gender equity, that your work also raises, most importantly, is obscured, right? And in this context, I was wondering, because I think, one of the things each of your organizations and the work that the women who make up your organizations are doing so interestingly is conceiving of and working to build and rebuild relationships with the state. Right? So I was wondering if you could also discuss how your organizations have conceived of that relationship between women's activism and the state. The Sakatsu clubs, in fact, have elected representatives, at least at the local level. So if each of you could talk a little bit about that, about elements that have been taken up, right? While important aspects of the activism have been obscured, and how you've thought about the relationship with the state.
So as you said, we have member of assembly at the local level, so local politicians we have. And the reason why they ran for an election was that they wanted to have soap, natural soap, instead of synthetic detergent in the public space. So they ran for the election and went elected. Actually, they were elected, but at that time, the environmental issue was not discussed in the parliament, the local parliament. So they were treated very badly, but they didn't give up, and they insist on preserving the environment at the local level, and they were very consistent and continued to work very hard. So at the end, the issues like environment and education was finally taken up by the local assembly. So I think protecting environment and children's rights was the very big issue for our members.
I would say that at SEWA we always believe in political action, but remain away from electoral politics. And after all, the government is of the people and for the people, and therefore, how do you work on political action? And that is what we have been doing. So the laureate, Right Livelihood Laureate, was nominated as a member of the parliament or she was also made the member of the Planning Commission. A lot of our grassroots leaders also get elected as the head of the village council, but it is very, very clear to every member of SEWA, all 3.2, that the moment they align with a political party, they cease to be a member of SEWA. So that's how we work on political action. The other important aspect I want to emphasize is that for the poor and the informal sector women, innovation is their coping mechanism. It's not a luxury for them. So they have to continuously innovate for their own survival. And therefore, we are the ones who really come up with demonstrative pilots, which are then taken up by the governments. And then that's how the scaling up can happen. So one of the programs where Aishwarya is going to work on the research is on green villages. And it's the women who took up the initiative of greening their homes, greening their livelihoods, greening their mobility mechanisms, greening the villages. And when you see that, you know, how it really changes the entire air quality, how it leads to reduction in emissions, now the government is wanting to convert it into a national program. And that's how you make. This is what climate justice means, that, you know, when you talk to our members that what do you mean by climate justice, what they say is that it has to be just to the nature, just to the women and their families, and just to the livelihoods. Then only it's called climate justice. It cannot be an imbalanced justice. And then we say that this is climate justice. And therefore, I think the parametric insurance program, we were the first in the entire country to start with. And today the government is looking at very carefully monitoring the outcomes, and the government will want to take it up as a program. And so we go beyond it. And that's why our members are contributing 1 day's wage every month to build their own climate resilience fund. And that climate facility will provide them with access to parametric insurance, will provide access to climate finance for adaptation and mitigation, will also provide contingency finance. And that's how you work on climate justice, on building resilience of your members. And that's how, you know, you demonstrate that this is how the pro-poor policies and programs, what inclusion really means is, and that's where I think, therefore we believe that, you know, poor just don't remain workers or producers, but they have to become the owners and managers of their own programs and enterprises. And so we have solar parks, but these are all run by the women themselves. So the question of, it's very difficult to fight a mighty government, but how do you create demonstrative alternatives? And then you take it to scale.
Yeah, I want to add another dimension of what especially to women. One of the things that Indigenous women are also struggling is that Indigenous women are not just women, they're also Indigenous, but they're part of the Indigenous peoples. So they are in a nexus between the individual rights as women and the collective rights as part of Indigenous peoples. And thereby, the land rights issue become controversial because for some, they look at it as an individual right to land and not the collective right of the community, both men and women. And I want to cite an example, India, for example, where the Forest Rights Act recognizes the community land rights, right? But in the implementation, they put the name, they said, okay, we will only proceed with by family and not the community. And then that land is named in the name of the man, not the woman. So now, a lot of the women are saying, no, you cannot continue recognizing our land rights like that. First, you need to recognize our community land, and within that is the individual land. Because with recognizing the collective land, we can better protect it. But if you recognize only individual, and especially in the name of men, they easily sell it out. That's what happened. Because the men say they can always find a job somewhere else, but the women stay. They're the ones working on the land. So when they have a crisis, like for example, they need cash, it's easy for the men to say, let's just sell it. Anyway, I can find a job somewhere else, right? But the women insist no, because that is their basis of livelihood, food security, and all. So that is, again, that's a challenge, because some people don't understand what we mean by collective ownership of land, that we share the land, and that has to be recognized as such. Because once we break it up into individual lands, we're breaking up our system of collective management and decision-making on how our land and resources are going to be used. And in our interaction with the government, that's always what we emphasize, especially in relation to Indigenous women. And at the global stage, we actually were able, together with the Indigenous women's movement and the Indigenous movement, to push for a general recommendation on the rights of Indigenous women and girls by the CEDAW Committee, the Committee for the Elimination of Discrimination of Women. So it's called GR 39, or General Recommendation 39, that actually interprets the individual and collective rights of Indigenous women as inseparable. They are interlinked, but you cannot divide, they have to be recognized together. Because if we don't recognize it together, Indigenous women will be more vulnerable to violence, and they will not be able to gain their dignity and well-being, both as women and as part of the Indigenous society.
Such excellent points of points to think with and discuss further. I want to take a question that we've got from the audience. So this is for all three of you. How do you foresee women in the United States, in the US, supporting women who live in historically exploited regions that are vulnerable to climate change? What kind of solidarities can we conceive of, right, between women here in the United States and the parts of the world that you represent? Do you want to start? Yeah.
I'm going to be a bit direct, but I think the women here can contribute by polluting less and consuming. Thank you. Because I believe the whole issue of justice has to come because the rich pollute and the poor pay the price for it. And the second is that it's one thing that we all talk about climate and the climate crisis and how it affects. It's very different to live in a climate crisis situation. So just come and experience, how do you live in 54 degrees centigrade? And how do you survive? Or how do you live when it rains like 11 inches in 2 hours and it washes away everything? Your entire year's effort is washed away in front of your eyes. And I think that will tell you how can we as sisters, help each other. What's the solidarity meaning there?
From my end, of course, the solidarity relations, but also calling upon your companies, U.S. companies, and your government to stop polluting or to stop the destruction in other territories in the name of climate change. It's important that we held them to account. And I hope we raise our voice when these companies from the U.S. are destroying lands in other countries through mining, imposition of renewable energy, and of course the way they also treat other countries by imposing conditions just to make them take decisions to support, the development trajectory of the rich countries. Now, the trade war, for example, that we are facing, right? I think it's important for us to raise our voices together, because you are also part of the victim, but more important, you also have the agency, you also have the power, and if we combine your power and our power, it becomes stronger to raise these voices and call to action, because we like the whole debate, for example, in the climate change, as earlier mentioned, is the differentiated responsibility. The rich countries have to take greater responsibility for solving this crisis, because they're the ones who brought us this crisis. And we need to remind them that. We need to hold them accountable, because if we don't, then they will continue to do this and we become helpless. We end up, and we're not using our facility. Our agency to make those change, to make them take those actions that we need. All of us are change makers. All of us can contribute in really driving genuine climate change by taking those people who caused this crisis to be accountable and address this crisis at the root cause. No, and I think that the solidarity that we have is really to make that clear, make the message clear on who is accountable and who needs to take action to this. At the same time, we also do our share in reducing any elements that raise the global warming. So I think that's really important, and that's I think where the global movement needs to come together, together with those, especially those in the front lines that needs the help of everybody. Thank you.
What our members are doing is that they get together to think about how to keep their houses cool. So our members get together to learn how to insulate our house. So we share our knowledge, our techniques by gathering together to think about how to survive during the hot summer. And at the same time, our members are very active in lobbying the government to stop burning coal. Japan is the biggest coal burning state, and also nuclear. So in order to prevent CO2 emission, mitigate the CO2 emission. It is very important to eliminate nuclear power plants and also coal burning facilities. And Japan is the only country who had a big nuclear power plant disaster in Fukushima. So the government should know the real consequences to have such a dangerous facilities in Japan, but it's very weird, but the Japanese government is still promoting nuclear power and also promoting, not promoting, but they really depend on coal burning power generation. So so every time our government decide on the strategic plan for energy, we circulate the petition. So we usually collect we collect tens of thousands of signatures and deliver the petition to the government, but not successful yet. But by circulating the petition, we really understand that what is needed to pressure the government. So I think it is a very good way to educate people about energy policy in Japan.
So we have some more questions from the audience. They are, a lot of people are interested in thinking with you all about solidarity. So continuing and elaborating perhaps on the remarks you've just made, Joanne, there's a question specifically about indigenous rights and solidarity, but then I'll combine that with another question. So for Joanne, how does Indigenous Rights International build solidarity around the world amongst indigenous peoples around the world, right? And can you speak about the IPRI program? But there's another question that I want to combine and with that, which is also about solidarities. And going to Ryoko, your last point, the three of you represent associations of women from countries with different levels of wealth, industrial development, and global political power, right? You've expressed that your members experience the climate crisis and economic and political challenges in different ways. Do you see opportunities for collaboration across, national borders and from different positions, right? Japan being this industrialized nation, the Philippines and India occupying different positions. So both questions about solidarity, but, at different, coming from different angles. Yeah. Joanne, do you want to start?
Okay. Yeah, my organization, the Indigenous Peoples Rights International, was established exactly to generate a global solidarity and collaboration and action of indigenous peoples around the world to tackle the issue of human rights violations of indigenous peoples with impunity, ending our criminalization and violence that's happening in our territories. And the reason why we intentionally made it as a global, because the problem is it's a global crisis that requires global action. And when we say global action, it has to include people on the ground, grassroots movements, national organizations, regional networks, and global organizations of indigenous peoples. So at the outset, we already started working with local organizations in the spirit of solidarity. So we started in 5 countries, the countries with the highest number of criminalization and killings and violence. So this is Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, Democratic Republic of Congo, India, and the Philippines. Now we include other countries because the situation has worsened also in other countries. So we work directly with organizations in these countries, and we have joint campaigns. We did a lot of petition signing to generate support. And for indigenous communities who are struggling to defend their lands, right, from agribusiness or mining or extractive industry, it means a lot to them when they know that other organizations, other indigenous peoples in other parts of the world are with them, are expressing their support. Because sometimes these communities, they feel so helpless and vulnerable. So knowing that indigenous organizations across the world is supporting them gives them more confidence that they're doing the right thing. It gives them more courage to continue the struggle because their support provided in other areas. So that's actually what we do. And aside from building our own solidarity, we also bring the support and solidarity of many of the human rights organizations, global organizations. So we work, for example, directly with Global Witness, with Amnesty International, with Human Rights Watch, because they are our allies. They can magnify the cases, no, the cases of violations that's happening in indigenous territories. And with their support and solidarity, we can further amplify the voices of indigenous peoples on the ground and generate more support and action, especially attention by policymakers.
Yes, because I'm living in Japan, and Japanese companies have very bad history of destroying the environment in other countries. So we have to be very much aware of those facts, and we have to talk to that. We have to have such as a boycott of the Japanese companies' products in order to pressure the companies to stop doing those bad things in other countries. So we have to be very well informed to take actions in Japan. And also, another thing is that we buy a lot of GM food. Japan imports a lot of genetically modified crops from other countries, which means that farmers in other countries spray a lot of pesticide on their farm. So that is partly why we don't buy genetically modified crops. We don't want to destroy the environment and destroy the health of farmers abroad. So that is how we work in order to. So I think this is a kind of international solidarity to protect our environment and our health.
You know, the issues of poor and the women are the same, no matter which part of the world they are, whether they are in the developed countries or less developed or in a poor country. And therefore, I think we always believe in sisterhood, solidarity, building alliances. And I think what we are currently working on is building a global climate resilience fund for women. Countries may reduce their budgets on climate, may pull out of Paris Agreement, may not contribute to the Green Climate Fund or to the Loss and Damage Fund. It's all too far ahead. But, you know, how do we build our resilience? And that's through the Global Climate Resilience Fund, that where you can have innovative financial products, whether you use it for a first loss default guarantee or as a patient capital or as a blended finance mechanism. Similarly, we are setting up a global coalition on future of work for the workers in the informal economy as to what's going to be the future of work, what kind of an alternative economic pathways that you want to sort of set up. So I think we also have Alliance of Home-Based Workers, which is called HomeNet International. We have Alliance of Domestic Workers. We have Alliance of Street Vendors and Hawkers. So I think it is through this solidarity where, you know, street vendors from like 30 different countries are members, or home-based workers from several other countries are members, and the issues are the same. So how do we collectively work towards addressing those issues?
Great, thank you. We have more questions than we have time for, so I'll just ask this one last question. You know, there's a question about the unhoused. There's a question, Ryoko, specifically for you about reducing plastic waste. There are questions from the audience about persevering, you know, in the face of adversity. Questions about how you kind of work with apathy. So I want to kind of put it all together in one question, which is my question. You know, and as a last question, what gives you hope in this moment? And I think that's a good way to conclude our discussion here.
What is hope? Yes, yeah. I think my hope is that I'm surrounded by very motivated women who wants to change our society. And we are, as I said, we are based on democracy. Each person has the equal power. So yeah, I think I'm lucky to be in this environment. Yeah, so otherwise, yeah, the society is now, yeah, we have a lot of discouraging, depressing things. Mm-hmm. But now, I'm now surrounded by like-minded people, and yeah, that makes me hope.
Mm-hmm. Reema, do you
Sure, I think what gives me hope are the young youth and the women. And I have experienced and stood with our members in so many of their struggles and challenges, and that has given me the needed strength and courage to continue organizing these women for almost 4 decades now. And I think it's the poor women who are, in spite of their so many struggles and challenges, are always willing to take on newer risks in their lives. And it's all because of hope. They are always optimistic that, things will change. And therefore, at SEWA, we never call it as a failure. We call it as our constructive struggle. You never give up. You learn from the mistake, you analyze, reflect, and move on. And that's why I think we always believe that we shall overcome.
Yeah, for me, it's the indigenous communities that, in spite of all the attacks, in spite of all the land grabbing, in spite of all the difficulties that they're facing, they're fighting back. They're fighting back. And for me, that's hope. We've been fighting for centuries, and we've never given up. That's why we're here. We're still here trying to make our dignity intact. And I think a lot of us, like I said earlier, each of us can contribute in making the change. It's a choice that we make, whether we want to be part of the change or not. But I believe that each of us can contribute, and that gives me hope that every one of us can make a change. And if we do that, just imagine how we can change in spite of what's happening in this country. I really empathize with you, and I do give my sincere solidarity. But we can act together. Don't also think that you're alone. You have the support of peoples in the world. And I think this is the time that we need to be together. We need to care for each other. No matter what, we stand by together. And that, I think, is the hope we have. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. No, yes. We will end with song. But before that, join me in thanking our wonderful, wonderful, wonderful panelists for their work, their inspiring, their inspiration, and the time that they have given us to share. And Reema would like to end with a song.
Yeah, at SEWA we always end with a song. Without a song, a meeting doesn't conclude. And I would just sing it in English so that we don't have more time in translation. My colleague can join me in singing as well. So it's, we shall overcome, we shall overcome, we shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in our hearts, we do believe we shall overcome someday. Thank you. And since we were talking about solidarity, we also have a slogan for it. Ek hai. When I say hum sab, you all say ek hai, which means we are all one and we are all together in carving out our future. So, hum sab, hum sab, hum sab. Thank you, thank you.
That was terrific.